We begin in Venezuela. This Wednesday, President Nicolás Maduro updated the COVID-19 cases in the country that raised to 4 and raising the total numbers to 297.
Hoy tenemos 4 nuevos casos.
Today we discovered 4 new cases. They were imported and locally transmitted. In total, we have 197 cases as of Wednesday.
Likewise, Venezuelan president referred to the number of patients recovered from COVID-19.
Tenemos 197 casos.
While we have 197 cases, 111 people have recovered, which is a 56% of recoveries from the total. There are 30 people being kept under special care, another 25 hospitalized, and 20 are in private clinics. Sadly, 9 people have died.
In Guyana, Electoral Commission has again invited the Caribbean community, the CARICOM, to monitor the full recount of the elections held in the month of March. The invitation came just as the GCOM, the commission, was supposed to announce the time and place of this recount this Wednesday. 2 months after the controversial vote took place, but GCOM has yet to announce the date of the recount and the mechanisms that will be used. And the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, and current chairperson of CARICOM, gave information about CARICOM's emergency meeting this Wednesday. She took to Twitter to say that today, Wednesday, I participated in a virtual meeting of the CARICOM. We discussed the regional response to COVID-19. We received an update from CARFA and economic analysis on the impact of COVID-19 on the regional economies, and we considered proposals for common public health policies and border policies. On your screens, you have the tweet made by Prime Minister Mia Mottley, which is accompanied by a photo of this meeting. Now let's take a closer look at the numbers of COVID-19 in the Caribbean. On your screens here you have the details. As you can see, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Bermuda are the countries with the highest numbers in the region. Trinidad and Tobago has 114 positive cases, 8 deaths, and 20 persons recovered. Jamaica has 125, the highest number, with 5 deaths and 21 recovered. And Bermuda has 81 positive cases, 5 deaths, and 33 recovered. Overall numbers are 750 confirmed cases, 48 deaths, and 142 recoveries. These are the numbers provided by health ministries of the Caribbean region to the CARICOM. Moving on to Brazil, our correspondent in Rio de Janeiro, André Vieira, took to Twitter to update on the latest measures taken against COVID-19. André wrote on Twitter that the Supreme Federal Court of Brazil decided this Wednesday that local governments can impose restrictive measures to contain COVID-19 and rejected a request by Jair Bolsonaro that was intended to consolidate this decision. On your screens, you have the tweet made by our correspondent, André Vieira. And now we can stay in Brazil. Brazilian scientists estimate real coronavirus infection rates across the country could be 15 times higher than the government's official numbers. Our correspondent Brian Meir in Sao Paulo has more details. Welcome, Brian.
In the last 24-hour period recorded by the Brazilian National Health Ministry, 204 more people have died because of coronavirus. However, more and more academics and scientists are questioning these numbers. After the National Center for Health Intelligence Information released a study based on hospital records estimating that the real infection rate is 12 times higher than the numbers that the government is providing due to lack of testing. Another study was released by scientists from USP, the State University of São Paulo, and UNB, the Federal University of Brasilia, which also uses existing hospital records, which are updated daily, to estimate that up to 15 times higher number of people might be infected by coronavirus than the official rates. So this is being attributed to several factors. Lack of testing. Brazil has one of the lowest testing rates in the world, but also people are beginning to question whether the motives behind this are political, because Far-right President Jair Bolsonaro is trying to end lockdowns, trying to end quarantines to please his backers in the international and national capitalist community who put profit above human lives.
Thank you, Brian. We keep talking about Brazil. The Health Vigilance Secretary, Wanderson de Oliveira, had hoped to resign this week amid difficulties caused by far-right President Jair Bolsonaro towards health authorities. But Brazilian Health Minister Luis Henrique Mandetta turned down his close ally's resignation, as he said that when the time comes, they would both live together. Health authorities have defended social isolation to prevent the spread of COVID-19, while Bolsonaro continues to make calls to ease preventive measures due to the impact of the economy.
It seems that I am against the president and the president is against me. No, they are different visions of the same problem. And if there were a single vision, it would be a very simple problem to solve. It's not a machine problem, it's not black and white. There are a lot of variations.
I'm not leaving the minister. As the minister has already said here, we are together. I didn't have a specific reason, that's all. We are tired.
Time for a first break. We'll be right back. You follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura P. Telesur. Back with your news, the African continent has recorded more than 16,000 cases of COVID-19. Across all countries in the continent, cases are rising, excluding Lesotho and Comoros, which are yet to record any case. 3,228 people have recovered and 878 have passed away so far. The worst impacted countries are South Africa with over 2,400 cases, Egypt with 2,350, Djibouti with 435, and both Côte d'Ivoire and Guyana with about 630 cases. And the International Monetary Fund is predicting that COVID-19 will force a 1.6% contraction of the sub-Saharan African economies.
First, output in sub-Saharan Africa is expected to contract by 1.6% in 2020, and higher. In per capita terms, this will be higher still at close to 4%. The possibility that growth could be contract more still is quite high. And even if the contraction is limited to this level, it is worth noting that it represents a 5 percentage point downward revision since last October. And it is, as I noted, the worst performance that we've seen going back at least to 1970.
Palestinians have started to craft lanterns with their children amid the novel coronavirus lockdown in the Gaza Strip ahead of the holy months of Ramadan. So far, 13 COVID-19 cases have been recorded in the Palestinian enclave.
There is a lot of free time, so I taught my children how to make lanterns instead of going out on the streets and be exposed to infections. I taught them to make decorative lanterns for Ramadan.
Because of the coronavirus crisis in Gaza, all the children are stuck in their homes. They do not leave the house, and this leads to psychological and behavioral problems for children. So we thought about how can we occupy the children's spare time.
And Turkey has released tens of thousands of prisoners to ease overcrowding in jails and protect detainees from the coronavirus. Those eligible under the new law will be released under judicial control until the end of May, and the Justice Ministry will be able to extend the period 3 times by a maximum of 2 months each time. The Justice Minister said there are 17 confirmed cases of COVID-19 among prisoners, including 3 deaths, and 79 prison personnel had also tested positive. The law has been criticized by opposition parties and activities for excluding those jailed in terrorism charges, which included journalists and politicians. And millions of people in India will be allowed back to work next week despite a nationwide coronavirus lockdown. Under the new guidelines to be implemented from April 20th, agriculture and related sectors, including farmers, markets, logistics, and repair shops, will be restarted. Some factories, such as manufacturing, will also be reopened, but the staffing will be limited and working hours staggered. Factory owners are required to try and provide dormitories for workers or arrange special transport to and from the plants.
Most laborers have gone back to their villages. Now there's a shortage of workers, and the few who have stayed back are facing difficulties. The authorities don't allow them to enter the market area.
Workers are very afraid because they are not allowed to go anywhere. Vehicles are being stopped and we are not receiving as many supplies. Only a few vegetables come into the market now, and even then, only half of them get sold. Customers are not coming because they are afraid of the police.
Russian President Vladimir Putin instructed the government to provide direct state assistance to small and medium-sized businesses in the amount of $162 per employee. Authorities in Moscow also began issuing digital permits to residents using cars or public transport this week in an effort to reduce lockdown violations. Members of the armed forces, municipal officials, and journalists are among those exempt from the permit system. Now, to have more details about this emergency meeting called by President Vladimir Putin, we move on to Moscow to our correspondent Lisandra Andres. Welcome, Lisandra.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin called an emergency meeting by video conference with all members of the government in view of the accelerated increase in COVID-19 cases. 3,388 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours, which brings the total number to almost 24,500 throughout the country, while only one of the 85 regions remains without new cases. At this emergency meeting, the president announced a new series of economic measures that the government will begin to implement to support the most vulnerable sectors. He said that the government should finance small and medium-sized enterprises free of charge, provide them subsidies so that they can support their workers, and also pay them minimum wage to help keep employment levels low. He also called on government to draw up a list of the entities most affected by the measures that have been taken because of the COVID-19, including the aviation sector. The president said that they should allocate resources to help them out of this period of economic losses and also the debts they accumulate. The president left the possibility open and alert the members of the government to be ready to implement new measures in case that the situation in the country continues to worsen. Here in Moscow, about 14,500 cases have been registered, so a series of measures have been also taken. These measures consist in increasing the cleanliness of public areas, and permits are being issued by the Ministry of Interior, the police, and other government entities in order to move through different sectors of the city.
Thank you, Lisandra. That was Lisandra Andres, straight from Moscow. Like this, we go for a second break. Remember, find this and much more other information on our website, telestorenglish.net. We'll be right back. Back with our news, the ruling Democratic Party achieved a landslide victory in South Korea's parliamentary elections. According to preliminary electoral results, millions took to the polls for elections to fill the 300-member unicameral National Assembly. Citizens wore masks and disposable gloves as they voted in elections that had the highest turnout in nearly 3 decades despite the pandemic. According to Johns Hopkins University, South Korea has more than 10,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases and 225 deaths. In Canada, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that the lockdown in the country will remain as there are over 27,500 cases of the novel coronavirus and 954 deaths.
It will be weeks more before we can seriously consider loosening the restrictions. It would be terrible if we were to release restrictions too early and find out that we're suddenly back in another big wave of COVID-19 and everything we've gone through up to now would have been for nothing, because we'll find ourselves once again in the same situation.
And over 650 crew members of the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier have tested positive for the novel coronavirus, France Ministry of the Armed Forces said on Wednesday. As a late April 14th, a total of 668 crew members tested positive for COVID-19. The ministry added that 31 people were hospitalized at St. Anne's Hospital in Toulon, where one person remains in intensive care. The Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier arrived in the port of Toulon on the Mediterranean Sea on April 12, as many crew members started presenting symptoms of the virus. And the World Health Organization has expressed regret over United States' decision to cut funding to the body amid a global pandemic.
The United States of America has been a long-standing and generous friend to WHO, and we hope it will continue to be so. We regret the decision of the President of the United States to order a hold in funding to the World Health Organization. With support from the people and government of the United States, WHO works to improve the health of many of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people.
And Chinese authorities have categorically rejected the announcement made by President Donald Trump to cut financial support to the World Health Organization. More information from Beijing with our correspondent, Iranzi Peraza. Welcome.
Saludos, pues, efectivamente,
China has urged the United States to fulfill responsibility with the World Health Organization. The Asian giant was deeply concerned with the announcement by President Trump, saying he will withdraw financial support to the WHO for its management of the COVID-19 pandemic. The spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Minister, Zhao Lijian, criticized this decision and said it will greatly limit the ability of the World Health Organization to continue its works to stop the virus, as it would damage international cooperation. China has consistently criticized the attacks launched by the White House against the work of WHO, and especially its Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. They have also called on the United States to abandon this strategy and instead focus on stop the spread of the new COVID-19, especially in its territory. The United States is one of the worst affected nations right now. There are reportedly more than 25,000 deaths from COVID-19. For its part, China reports a little more than 83,000 cases of the disease and 3,348 deaths. During the last 24 hours, China recorded 46 new infections, 10 of them locally transmitted and 36 imported. In addition, throughout the country, only one death was recorded during the last 24 hours. In the city of Wuhan, this Wednesday, the provisional hospital Le Xinshan closed its doors, one of the hospitals built in a record time by the authority of China to serve the patients of COVID-19. The hospital ended its operations due to improvement of the situation in Wuhan and in Hubei province in general, where there have been several days without new cases.
Thank you, Iramzi. That was Iramzi Peraza from Beijing. Medical services in Wuhan, which were once overwhelmed by COVID-19 pandemic, are becoming available to other patients as the virus is now under tight control in the city. The entire medical team at Wuhan Orthopedic Hospital are back to work, ready to treat those suffering from bone and joint trauma. Safety remains one of the biggest concerns as hospitals across Wuhan resume outpatient services. So precautions have been taken to curb the spread of the coronavirus, and patients can get treatment only after showing their health QR codes and passing temperature checks.
When you're under the lockdown, you see no light at the end of the tunnel, and you don't know when it is going to end. But now, as the lockdown is lifted and everything is returning to normal, we have seen hope along with this process. which comes together with the advent of the spring. I think a victory over the coronavirus is ahead of us.
And as we come to the end, we want to leave you with this song, Lean on Me, a hymn to friendship, written and sung by musician Bill Withers, a string of soulful songs in the 1970s. His death in early April came as the public drawn inspiration from his music during the coronavirus pandemic, with healthcare workers, choirs, artists, and more posting their own redemptions and Lean on Me to help get through these difficult times. The inspiration these times comes straight from the Caribbean, as Cuban singer Sima Funk relaunched the theme. With this song, we come to the end. Thank you for watching.
It won't be long till I gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can feel those of your need. If you won't let show, you just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you understand. We all need somebody to lean